Hello and welcome. In this video, we are talking about security groups. We are going to discuss what security groups are and how best they can be used to protect our resources in an application environment. Let's dive in. Security groups control the traffic that is allowed to reach and leave resources that are associated with it. Each security group must have a unique name and description. For each inbound rule, you specify the source, port range, and protocol. Similarly, for each outbound rule, you specify destination, port range, and protocol. A VPC comes with a default security group. However, additional security groups can also be created. A security group can only be assigned to resources in the same VPC as the security group. Multiple security groups can be assigned to a resource. There are quotas, also known as limits, on the number of security groups can be created per VPC. Rules can be added to each security group, and security groups can be associated with a network interface. Security groups are stateful. That means if a request is sent from an instance, the response traffic for that request is allowed to reach the instance regardless of the inbound security group rules. Responses to allowed inbound traffic are allowed to leave the instance regardless of the outbound rules. Let's talk about the guidelines for best practices of security groups. Rule number 1. Authorize only specific IAM principles to create and modify security groups. Rule number 2. Create the minimum number of security groups that are needed. Rule number 3. Use each security group to manage access to resources that have similar functions and security requirements. Rule number 4. Authorize only specific IP address ranges when adding inbound rules for port 22 SSH or 3389 RDP to access EC2 instances. Rule number 5. Do not open large port ranges. Ensure that access through each port is restricted to the sources or destinations that require it. Rule number 6. Consider creating network ACLs with rules similar to security groups to add an additional layer of security to VPC. In conclusion, use security groups to safeguard resources in your environment. Create only necessary security groups and assign necessary inbound and outbound traffic rules. Follow best practices guidelines to ensure security in your environment. That's all about security groups. Thank you and see you in the next lesson.